It's kind of nice. Lipstick I'm wearing. I won't tell you which one. I don't want to get dinged for unauthorized sponsored content. But the thing about the lipstick I'm wearing on Crystal is as it slides away up the rim of the glass, it makes this little ringing only I can hear. Crystal is a lot of fun, you know. My little Japanese soda that I'm drinking. Don't worry, I got more. Anyway, where was I? I was going to finish this chapter that I started yesterday. See what I mean? It's no book. Just kind of fell out of itself. Yeah, anyway. This book, Harpo Speaks, which looks like this. Has very long chapters in it. It was written by Harpo Marx with Roland Barber. And as far as I don't know very much about the process of the writing of this book, but I think it was just a really lovely time, like just Harpo telling stories about himself, an oral history of himself. And then it was Roland Barber who took stuff down, edited it down. English is not my first language. But the chapter we were going over was chapter 10, But Can You Carry It on the Chief? And it was sort of a travelogue of different cities and towns and places that Harpo and his brothers performed in. And it was as they were heading off to London, England. That's where I left off last night because, this is a long chapter. It's like 98 pages long. I might still be reading it. So, off they go. They found some, they found some fame in the States. Right about now, they're in Cleveland, Ohio. And Brother Chico says, hey, how about we take it overseas and play in London? So, London, England. Everybody said the Marx Brothers would be an instant sensation in London. Music hall slapstick was the English audience's special cup of tea. Us, they would eat up, like the kippers and crumpets. So what happened? We opened at the London Coliseum and we were razzed off the stage. It was a worse fiasco than the Royal. Much worse. People began to hoot and whistle and throw pennies at us. Groucho went to the footlights and said, "We came all the way from America to entertain you, so you might at least throw shillings." We had never been so humiliated in public in all our lives, in all our professional years. The manager was fit to be tied, but he wasn't disappointed in us. He thought we were great. He explained what had happened. The Marx Brothers, being headliners, were billed over the premier danseuse, a dame who had never been demoted to second billing at the Coliseum. The danseuse was hopping mad, so she organized a claque to give us the comeuppance and supplied them with coins to throw at us. The dancer won. She got back her top billing at the Coliseum, and we were switched to another theater, the Alhambra. At the Alhambra, we were a smash. London couldn't get enough of us. We couldn't get enough of Londoners either. We'd never known such doting, unrestrained audiences. That sounds nice. Not only that, we found that the English everywhere gave actors and vaudevillains special treatment. In hotels and cafes, on ships and buses and trains, we got top priority, and so did our baggage. It was a far cry from days of one-night stands at home, the days of stale bread pudding, bug-ridden hotels, crooked managers, and trudging from town to town to town like unwanted travelers. Here, there was genuine kindness and dignity and show business. even between the most eminent impresarios and the seediest performers. One scene I will never forget. We, we were presented in England by a famous promoter and sportsman named Cochrane. When Cochrane called for auditions to round out our show at the Alhambra, a mob turned up. Every act in the British Isles, except the Coliseum Danseuse, wanted to share the bill with the Marx Brothers. Sorry, with the balmy Marxes, who hated to say no to anybody, had the painful duty of turning down 98% of the hopefuls. One of these was an aged hoofer. He must have been damn near 80, who'd obviously spent his last copper getting his costume out of mothballs and into immaculate condition. He came out in gray suit, gray derby, gray spats, gray shoes, swinging a gray cane, straight out of a Victorian music hall, and went into his song and dance. He put up a courageous, dapper front, but his bones creaked, and his voice had rusted to a croak. It was an embarrassing moment. Ugh, been there. Cochrane, down in the orchestra, raised a hand to stop him. "I thank you very much," he said unhappily. "I shall let you know." Then, instead of retreating in defeat and humiliation to make room for the next act, the ancient hoover stepped grandly down to the footlights. He leaned over and pointed his cane at the conductor. "Maestro," he said, "would you please play 4 bars for me to go off with?" The conductor complied. The old gentleman danced off stage to the music, waving his derby as if it were his fourth curtain call. Everybody in the house, including the impresario, broke into applause. The only disagreeable thing about England that trip was the climate. It was chilly and damp when we got there, and it kept getting chillier and damper. I never once got really warm, outdoors or in. Chico and I shared an apartment near the theater where the only heat came from an open coal grate. Our last night there was the coldest yet. As the last of our scuttle of coal was burning out, we decided the only way we'd keep from freezing was to bundle up in all the clothes we had with us and stay up and play pinochle instead of going to bed. But the chill came creeping through every layer of every shirt, sweater, suit, raincoat, and overcoat we had on. "What the hell?" said Chico. "We can't die of pneumonia out here last night. That would be ungrateful after all they've done for us." "Yeah, dude, I've had pneumonia. You don't want that." So saying, he pulled a drawer out of our dresser, stomped it on it, and smashed it and threw the sticks in the fire. We played 2 hands of pinochle. Then it got cold again. We burned up the rest of the drawers one by one. Then the bureau itself had to go. Next we threw on the chairs and played cards standing up. Before dawn the fire began to die again. We broke up the table and piled it on the fire and had to finish the pinochle game sitting on the floor. We took off for the boat trains first thing in the morning. Too early to wake up the landlord to tell him goodbye and thank him for the pleasant stay. But we left him a note, and enough dough to replace all the extra firewood we had burned. We left the note on the mantelpiece, which we hadn't been able to rip up from the wall, although God knows we tried. Damn, bunch of rowdy boys. So in spite of the climate, my last memory of England was a warm one. Aboard the SS Homeric, we had risen so high in class that now the rule was, don't buy anything you can't put on the Cunard line. I brought back a lot of things I couldn't have carried on the chief, including an ancient sheepdog named Hokum. I expected complications getting him on into the States, but Hokum came straight off the boat, with no bother whatsoever about quarantine. The truth was, the authorities were so intent on nabbing Harry Kabikoff that they didn't bother to impound my dog or even check his papers. Harry Kabikoff was a fighter, a lightweight, who once made the mistake of trying to clobber Benny Leonard in an exhibition back in St. Paul and had gotten himself decked by the champ Kabikoff. Became quite a pal of Leonard's after that performance. And of ours, too. I'm not yawning. The day we sailed for England, Harry came to the boat to see us off. When the boat sailed, he was still in our stateroom. He had a notion he'd like to try his luck in the English ring. We had to put up bond for him and pay for his fare across. Harry's Harry's luck in the English ring was no better than his luck in the Minnesota ring. He came to see us off at Southampton, and somehow tarried too long in our stateroom again, and we had to pay for his fare back home. The Cunard line was satisfied, but the U.S. State Department was not. So, when we landed, all the officials were too busy hunting for the tiger we had smuggled in to bother about the illegal entry of any sheepdog. By the time Harry got off the hook, with our help, Hokum was home free, to all intents and purposes, a bona fide Yankee Fido. That man stole that dog. New York. Among the other things we brought back from abroad was an inflated opinion of how good we were. The conquest of London had gone to our heads. We got on our high horses and refused to kowtow to the emperor of the palace. What the hell? We were now royalty ourselves. The next thing we knew, we were in a fight to the finish with E.F. Albee over a minor issue. It didn't take long for the finish to come. When we worked an Albee theater out of town, our act lasted 40 minutes. It was a sort of afterpiece to the movie on the program. There would be as many as 20 people besides ourselves in the company, including extras, musicians, and stagehands. We were on a fixed budget, and this involved a detailed cent-by-cent accounting. If we ran over the budget on production costs, the deficit was made up of our salaries. Whenever this happened, we howled all the way to New York, but it never did us any good. The accounting department was mighty, and it prevailed. On returning from England, we were booked to take a company on a swing through upstate New York and over to Cleveland. The itinerary was okay with us, but we told Murdoch we didn't approve of the budget. Specifically, we felt that the allocation for stagehands was $19.50 too high. Who the hell were we to question an item on the budget? Murdoch wanted to know. I read that wrong. Who the hell were we to question an item on the budget? Murdoch wanted to know. We were the Marx Brothers, international artistes. That's who the hell we were. We wouldn't give up. Murdoch said we were crazy. The budget had been drawn up by Mr. Albee himself, and it couldn't be changed. My book's falling apart. The next day, Mr. Albee told us what we could do. We could look for work elsewhere. Furthermore, we were never to set foot again in an Albee theater. Good, said we. And now we were free to go on to bigger things. Too late. The sobering impact of what we had done sank in. We'd kicked ourselves smack off the pinnacle of vaudeville. Too late we learned that Albee's power ranged far beyond his own marquee. When you were on his blacklist, doors were closed in your face all over the town. Still, we were a headline act. What to do? The first thing we did was send for Minnie. She came charging out of retirement on the next train east. Minnie turned the city upside down. At last she found an open door. The door of the Schubert brothers' office. Nobody warned us, unfortunately, that it was a trap door. The Schuberts had come up with the scheme of sending review companies out on the road in cutthroat competition with Albee and the Orpheum. These companies were known as Schubert units, and they were headlined by outcasts and exiles from the big-time circuits. This qualified us. We were welcomed with open arms, and papers were signed for the creation of the Marx Brothers Schubert unit. Our new bosses were famous in the theater, but not for their liberal treatment of performers. A Schubert unit had to pay its own way. Each unit had an advance man to put out posters and arrange for theaters, which had to be off the beaten track. Since all the big houses were controlled by the moguls, the Schuberts were fighting. But there was no budget for advance publicity. There was no advance money for the company, or expense money, or even a guarantee. The unit paid itself from week to week out of box office receipts on a fixed percentage. Under these conditions, we had to stage a full 2 hour show, not just a 40-minute act, as we had for Albie. We had to hire variety acts and musicians and cook up an afterpiece that required a minimum of props and scenery. The more the Schuberts had to lay out in production costs, the more they whittled down the company's box office percentage. For all this, the Marx Brothers were the Marx Brothers. We'd done it the hard way before, and we'd do it the hard way again. We hit the road. Buffalo, New York. We landed in Buffalo to find no posters up. No theater lined up for the unit to play in. Our advance man was running a week behind the show. Business was lousy. Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Business got worse. We had to cut out people from half salary down to 1/3 salary. Acts were pulling out right and left, and replacing them wasn't easy. The Schuberts declined to accept our collect calls or reply to our telegrams for help. In Milwaukee, Minnie announced that she had the answers to our troubles. All this show needs, she said, is a little more class. Like new special effects. That'll pack 'em in. When Minnie spoke these words, I was hearing a voice out of the past I'd hoped forgotten. A past of hawkshop mandolins and fake carnations. I couldn't believe we'd fallen all the way back to this. Just 4 months ago, we'd been the guests of honor at the London townhouse of the Duke of Gloucester. Are you drinking enough water? Take a sip. Just 4 months ago, we had been the guests of honor at the London townhouse of the Duke of Gloucester. But Minnie lived only for the present and the job at hand. Her present job in Milwaukee was to make a breathtaking spectacle out of the Chinese number in her first act. She lit on this number for the simple reason that one of the girls in the unit was stuck on a local boy whose father owned a Chinese restaurant and who agreed to give Minnie all the Chinese props and decorations she wanted, if she would plug the restaurant during the show. Minnie had an inspiration. It would be a train scene for the special effect. 2 stagehands would shower rice down from the flies, while lights played through the falling rice atmosphere. It would be the most thrilling thing ever seen in Milwaukee, Minnie proclaimed. It was not, however. That night it was raining hard outside. Real rain. The theater roof leaked. The special effects rice, sitting high above the stage in 2 big cans, got pretty wet by the middle of the first act. It came time for Minnie's new number when the stagehands got the cue to start the shower. 2 fat globs of soggy rice plummeted to the stage. The kids on stage didn't know what hit them. They got the hell off before they could find out. Death in Milwaukee. Indianapolis, Indiana. By now, our advance man was 2 weeks behind the show. Bills were piling up. Our credit was exhausted. We were served with a lawsuit. A lawyer had notified us that all our assets, costumes, props, and sets would be attached the minute we arrived in Indianapolis. Sure enough, when we arrived, the lawyer was there to greet us with the deputy sheriff. But they were stymied. They couldn't lay a finger on us, because our assets had already been attached. We had the papers to prove it. Minnie had arranged this through a friendly lawyer on our way to Chicago. The only place we could find a play in Indianapolis was an amphitheater that seated like 4,000 people, miles from the center of town. When we complained about the size of the joint, the manager told us not to worry. Because he had a wide, portable screen that could set up across the middle of the auditorium, giving it a false back, and giving it the effect that a half-empty house was really a full house. The Indianapolis opening of the Marx Brothers Schubert Revue was attended by 128 paying customers. The manager obliquely moved the screen down 8 more rows to the 1/4 mark. Attendance at the second performance was 34. After the second show, I saw Minnie pacing the stage, whistling vaguely, squinting at the light borders, and rubbing her hands. I knew what was coming. A new special effect. But this one was different. No fancy scenery, nothing as tricky as raining rice. This one would be done with lights alone. But what a lighting effect. When word of Minnie's new spectacle had buzzed around Indiana, the house would be jammed to the rafters. Minnie worked out her scheme with the spotlight operator. It was simple, she said. While the company sang Moonlight Bay, the spotlight man would project the moon and a galaxy of stars in the ceiling and the proscenium, and rippling water on the floor of the stage and the apron. So simple, it was genius. True theatrical genius. To give many credit, it might indeed have been a brilliant effect. We never had a chance to find out. That night, the spotlight operator turned up drunk. He got confused about nature's laws, let alone Minnie's cues. He had the moons and the stars shining on the floor and the water rippling all over the ceiling. Well, word buzzed around Indianapolis, all right. The total attendance for our fourth show was a nice round figure 10 people. Even with the screen behind the second row, it still looked like 10 people. Not even Minnie had to face now even Minnie had to face reality. We were washed up. We were stranded. We didn't have enough dough to pay our way out of the hotel. We could sneak out of the hotel, but we still didn't have train fare to any point beyond Kokomo. We didn't have enough dough to pay the kids in the company the price of dinner. It was the end of the line for the Schubert unit, and it looked like the end of the Marx Brothers, headliners in the Orpheum, the hit of the Palace, and the toast of London. I had 7 cents in my pocket. Her sons were afraid to say it, but Minnie said it. We'll have to wire Al for a loan. We knew that Uncle Al was financially good for our getaway money. He now had a partner, a guy named Gallagher, and owned half interest in the most popular song in the country, Mr. Gallagher and Mr. Sean. But Minnie was not exactly sure if she had sent the telegram to her brother's right address. She wouldn't admit it, but she was also afraid that even if Uncle Al received the wire, he might decide that this was the last straw and refuse to bail us out. Boys, she said, we can only wait and hope. While waiting and hoping, I went for an aimless walk on the outskirts of Indianapolis. I was depressed and confused, and I had to be alone. I kept telling myself that something good always happened every time I hit bottom. But I didn't believe it. What could happen? What could I do? Groucho could go back in vaudeville as a single. Zeppo could go back to Chicago with Minnie, where he'd have no trouble finding a job. He was the only high school graduate in the family. Chico could land a job as a piano player on his own terms anywhere, but me? What was I trying to do besides being a Marx Brother? Well, I could play the harp on a New York City ferry. For nickels and dimes beyond that, nothing. As I walked, a long-forgotten voice came out of the past. Miss Flatto. Miss Flatto waggling her finger at my nose and saying, "Someday you'll realize, young man. Someday you'll realize." Okay, so now I realized. I'd come to no good end, exactly as she had predicted. I was a man of nearly 30 years, and here I was stranded in a strange city with 7 cents in my pocket, and no way of earning cent number 8. "Okay, Miss Flatto," I said to the voice of my memory. "You've had your revenge." It was the only time I ever felt sorry for myself. I came out of my daze. I was startled to find I was standing watching an auction sale. The inventory of a little general store in the suburbs, groceries, notions, and dry goods, was being auctioned off. There were about 20 people there. They must have been jobbers mostly, because the auctioneer was knocking down the stock in big lots. I was careful to keep my hands in my pocket so I could resist any crazy impulse to make a bid and blow my entire capital of 7 cents. The shelves were nearly emptied out, and most of the crowd had left, but still I hung around, having nothing better to do with myself. Finally, everything was gone except one scrub brush, the former owner hovering in the background, the auctioneer, myself, and an elderly Italian couple. The elderly couple had been there all the time. Either they had no money or they were too timid to make a bid on anything. Whichever it was, they exchanged sad looks now that the auction was winding up. The auctioneer was tired. "All right," he said. "Let's get it over with and not horse around. I have left here one last desirable item. One cleansing brush in a number 1 brand new condition, guaranteed to give your floors so clean you can eat off. And what am I offered?" The old Italian guy and his wife looked at each other, searching for the key to the right thing to say. The auctioneer glared at them. All right, he yelled. It's only a goddamn scrub brush. They held on to each other like they had done something wrong. I said quickly, 1 cent. The auctioneer whacked his gavel. He sighed and said, "Sold, thank God, to the young American gentleman for 1 cent." I picked up my brush and handed it to the old lady. She was as touched as if I had given her the entire contents of the store. The old man grabbed my hand and pumped it. They both grinned and poured out a river of Italian that I couldn't understand. Eh, think nothing of it, I said, and added, "Ciao, eh?" which is the only Italian I could remember from 93rd Street. They thought this was pretty funny the way I said it, and they walked away laughing. I walked away laughing too. A day that had started out like a nothing day, going nowhere except down, had turned into a something day with a climax and a laugh for a finish. I couldn't explain it, but I felt good. I hadn't felt so good in years. A lousy penny scrub brush had changed the whole complexion of my life. When I got back to the hotel, the money had arrived from Uncle Al, just as I anticipated. It had been decided that Groucho should audition as a single, Zeppo returned to Chicago with Minnie, and Chico hired out as a piano player. To all of these decisions, I said nuts. This was the longest, serious speech I had ever made in front of the family, and everybody listened. Then everybody started talking. We talked ourselves out until all our self pity was gone. What had happened to us was our fault, not the Schuberts or anybody else's. And what was going to happen to us would also be our own doing, not the Schuberts or anyone else's. Aboard the eastbound Pennsy, the other passengers on the coach kept complaining, so we bribed the porters a quarter and spent the night in the men's room of the nearest Pullman car. I tootled on the clarinet and played pinochle with Chico. Groucho smoked his pipe, read a book, did deep knee bends. At the same time, we were all working, throwing ideas into the kitty, and putting together a show we could do back in New York. None of us stopped to think how idiotic and deluded we were. What show? For whom? We were not only exiled by the moguls, but now even the scavengers wouldn't touch us. Absolutely idiotic. And thank God we were. The train ride from Indianapolis to New York, clacking through the blackness from the end of the line to what looked like the beginning of nothing, was the most momentous jump we ever made. For me, it was the prologue to a new kind of life in a new kind of world. Well, looks like it's turning around for Harpo and Harpo's family. That's nice. I'm not going to get into the next chapter, even though it's one of my favorites in this book. You can look up Alexander Woollcott yourself. I don't know very much about Alexander Woollcott, except that he was gay and had a cool mustache and was friends with Harpo and a bunch of other writers. I don't remember. I have the internet now. I could look it up. I mean, I had the internet when I bought this book. It was 1998. But you know, the next chapters begin about their friendship. It's kind of nice. Harpo sounds really happy in these chapters. And then again, when he meets his wife Susan, and when his kids come, he gets really happy about that. Man, it's sweet to grow old. Oh, pardon me, there's someone in the hall. It's okay.
Are you still recording?
No, I'm not recording. It's playing live. I'm getting you guys. You don't have to walk into that camera.
No, that's just weird. I was going to tell you, Kenny Rogers passed away.
Oh my.
So you might want to send emails to our friend who is feeling it extra hard.
We're live. Things happen sometimes. My wife likes to chew ice. She stays pretty hydrated. Speaking of hydration, I like to stay hydrated myself. My mouth feels better. My eyeballs feel better. You know that weird feeling? Like you drink a big old glass of water and like before, like maybe you were sad or crying, you drink a big old glass of water and suddenly like your eyes don't feel like crunchy anymore. You ever had crunchy eye? Don't have crunchy eye. I mean, don't let your eyes get crunchy. It's bad for you. Do you have a nice refreshing beverage? I mean, it's good to have plenty of water. And I hope you have access to that. I really do. But for other times, what else do you got? Cool. How do you like it? Yeah. I don't know, dude. Pretty tasty, right? All right, here we go. Ready? Ups. Here's to you, friend. I had intended to read another chapter from another more different book tonight. This one, well, it's called, you may have heard of it. It's called Moby Dick. It's written by a person by the name of Herman Melville. And I still have this from this phase in the late 90s where I picked up a lot of classic books and just read them completely. And Moby Dick, though, I could never get all the way through. I'd go at it in pieces, start in the middle, get to the bottom. Yeah, but I like it. It's really kind of a fun book. And I'm excited to read a little piece of it for you tomorrow. What's a book you really like? Well, that's fine. You don't have to have a favorite book. What's the thing you like to read? Oh, cool. I don't know that one very much. What else? Oh yeah? That sounds good. What's a writer you enjoy then? Oh yeah? Oh, what's your favorite thing by them? Oh, that sounds great. Do you think I should check some of that out? I'm not going to the library anytime soon, but got the library app on the telephone. I can access the Los Angeles Public Library, the Burbank Public Library. I don't think I can access the Glendale Public Library anymore, but that's a whole other thing. Oh, do you have a favorite library in town? The downtown Central Public Library gets a lot of love, deservedly so. It is a beautiful building. It goes several stories underground, several stories above the ground. There's sculptures suspended impossibly from the ceiling. This beautiful rotunda with this massive globe, marble inlay. Ah, just check it out. It's so good. The LA Central Public Library, but honestly, I think my favorite library was probably the library in Marina del Rey. It was the library, or what is the library that's right on the marina, right on the water. And when my sister and I were little kids, my parents had this job where they did this yacht detailing business. There's a lot of yachts there, Marina del Rey. This was the 80s, so a number of them either belonged to doctors or divorced dads. We mostly worked with doctors, but when we weren't in school during the summer, I was going to say we, but mostly me, spent all of our time in that library, all of my time in that library. It's great. I'd just get there as soon as we arrived at the marina, and just either walk or just take my sister's bike. The last few bits of this soda sure is hard to pour out. There was a summer reading program that I think was specifically for the neighborhood kids. We lived in South Central at the time, which, if you're in Los Angeles, that's a bit of a ways from Marina del Rey. I mean, currently I live in Valley Village, which is a good deal further away from Marina del Rey than is South Central, I think. Sorry, I've got a loud beverage. It's a little marble in it. I don't understand the purpose of the marble. Well, I mean, I suppose it's a sort of early freshness seal. Seems to work pretty well. Strawberry soda. It's very nice, this carbonated soda. Well, I will read something quick. Now, this is not the original cover, mind you. It's a very old book that I purchased for myself when I was in high school. It was my junior year. I don't know why I threw out the dust jacket it came with, but this book was printed in 1902. I try to be very careful with it because of that, but for the most part, I try not to let it leave the house. Yeah, I picked it up at a bookstore that's not there anymore. Sam Johnson's. Venice Boulevard. That was a pretty cool little bit of time for me. I mean, to me, it sticks out all the more because I was in high school at the time. So, to me, the various bits of it just seem bigger. But there was this beautiful stretch. My mom, my sister, and I, we lived in a one-bedroom apartment at the top of the hill on Centinela, just above Venice Boulevard. It's great. Walked to school, I kind of liked it. And there was this whole stretch of cool shops on Venice Boulevard, just above Centinela. There was this really cool bookstore, all these old thrift stores. There were two costume shops right next to each other. I got so many hats. So many hats. Hats with bells, full crowns. I like a hat. But yeah, this book is called Not a Nonsense Anthology. And it is a collection of nonsense. I mean, really, literally nonsense. Poems, limericks. Oh, here's one. You might recognize this one. Oh, look, the bookmark is an ad for the Santa Barbara Book Fair. It advertises round trip bus service from LAX to Santa Barbara. I mean, Santa Barbara is not far, but dang, dude. So, yeah, you might recognize this one. It goes, "Your old Father William," the young man said, "and your nose has a look of surprise. Your eyes turn round to the back of your head, and you live upon cucumber pies." I know it," the old man replied, "and it comes from employing a quack, who said if I laughed when the crocodile died, I should never have pains in my back." "Your old Father William," the young man said, "and your legs always get in your way. You use too much mortar in mixing your bread, and you try to drink Timothy hay." Very true," said the wretched old man. "Every word that you tell me is true, and it's caused by my having a kerosene can painted red where it ought to be blue." "Your old Father William," the young man said, "and your teeth are beginning to freeze. Your favorite daughter has wheels in her head, and the chickens are eating your knees." "You're right," said the old man, "I cannot deny that my troubles are many and great, that I'll butter my ears on the 4th of July, and then I'll be able to skate." It's written by Anonymous. Anonymous seems to have written a lot of the poems and rhymes in here. Isn't that funny? Tweedledum and Tweedledee resolved to have a battle, for Tweedledum said Tweedledee had spoiled his nice new rattle. Just then flew by a monstrous crow as big as a tar barrel, which frightened both the heroes so they quite forgot their quarrel. That's not usually how you say quarrel, but I guess I could have said barrel. Crows don't get that big. And look, this one's actually called Nonsense. "Good reader, if you e'er have seen, when Phoebus hastens to his pillow, the mermaids with their tresses green dancing upon the western billow; if you've seen at the twilight dim, when the lone spirit's vesper hymn floats wild along the winding shore, the fairy train their ringlets weave, glancing along the spangled green; if you've seen all this and more, God bless me, what a deal you've seen." Aptly titled. Well, at this point, I do a little bit get the feeling that I'm staying up just to stay up. But I'm glad you stayed up with me. I'm gonna go wash my hands, wash my face. I'm gonna go to bed. I feel not terrible about what about today. Oh, things are so weird. No, I mean just about what I've been able to do today. I've done my best to keep us all pretty safe. Heather's done what she can to keep us all pretty safe. And that's all we can do. Just look after each other. I believe in you. You're doing a good job. Yeah. Okay. I'll see you tonight. Take care of yourself. Bye bye.